All right, I'd like to call to order the September 23rd, 2024 Mountlake Terrace Planning Commission meeting to order. Would you please take the roll?
Chair Batista.
Here.
Commissioner Thompson.
Here.
Commissioner Betcher.
Here.
Commissioner Landis.
Here.
Commissioner Morgan.
Here.
Commissioner Stenson.
Present.
All right. Item number 3, approval of the September 9th, 2024 meeting minutes. Does anybody have any changes or corrections to those? I am not hearing or seeing any, so we'll go ahead and declare those accepted as presented. Item number 4, public comment. We do have someone here tonight. Would anybody like to make public comment for any item that is not on our agenda for tonight? Okay, it doesn't look like for in person. Online, was there anybody who signed up for something not on the agenda? Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on to item number 5, public hearing for the draft Mountlake Terrace Vision 2044 comprehensive plan.
All right. Good evening, Chair Batista, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Jonathan Morales, Senior Planner. I'm joined today with Christy Osborne, CD Director, as well as Emily Larson, Senior Planner at OTAC Consulting. So today we are here for our public hearing on the Mountlake Terrace Vision 2044 Draft Comprehensive Plan. So in terms of agenda, we did want to bring back the land use map discussion. We have a draft land use map that was as directed at the last meeting, so what we're calling the recommended draft land use map. Then we'll go into a summary of agency and public comments that we received throughout the draft plan review process. So this is going back since July to current. Then draft plan review process recap, and then a review of next steps, and then a discussion and recommendation to City Council that Planning Commission will lead. So in terms of project status, we are here today, September 23rd, Planning Commission recommendation forwarded to City Council. We are targeting an adoption date by Council of October 16th. So at the last meeting, we heard some feedback on the draft land use map options that we presented. We had an option A and an option B. So what we have before you is sort of a combination between the two. So as you remember, we have a residential mixed use land use designation that we are now referring to as neighborhood mixed use, and that's the purple coloring. We have additional neighborhood mixed use density in Cascade View. So at the 212th Street Southwest and 44th Avenue West intersection, including this area here, so west of 44th, we have that designated as neighborhood mixed use. St. Pius Church, we have that as neighborhood mixed use, and we also extended some of those parcels to be neighborhood mixed use. So yes, 220th Street Southwest and I-5 intersection, east of I-5 is neighborhood mixed use on the corridor there. We expanded the neighborhood mixed use at 228th Street Southwest and 44th here. And area south of 238th Street Southwest and west of 56 is residential 3, so that's that orange coloring. So this is what we heard at the last meeting and what we're bringing forward as the recommended draft land use map. In terms of next steps on our plate as staff, and what we discussed at the last meeting in terms of addressing development standards and design standards, we're going to go through those with the zoning code updates that are forthcoming. We will also revisit the ground floor active use overlay discussion, including where to locate those with zoning code amendments or code updates. And just a reminder that the land use map will inform the zoning map, so that will be forthcoming as well. And then there's just the map with the legend. So any comments there?
Do we want to go back to that one piece of property and discuss it behind the water tower park right there?
Oh, yes. Yes, so I know there was some discussion on the parcels just west of Jack Long Park. So we have like 4 or 5 parcels that are currently residential 2 or residential 1. There was some discussion of sort of wrapping that around and upzoning that to neighborhood mixed use. So I guess we just wanted to bring that forward as whether that's something that is unanimous across the board or, yeah, so how would you like to approach that?
Well, I know that came as an email to us, and I went and just kind of walked that area, and it does almost make sense that those long lots that are facing the freeway would be upzoned if they're kind of backing essentially what we're calling neighborhood mixed use. And because of their proximity to the off-ramp, it almost, I guess, it would be a very strange cutoff of neighborhood mixed use right at that point to almost not extend it down there, kind of to that road south of Jack Long Park. Or I guess, the other thought is maybe you zone that residential 3, give opportunity maybe for higher density right there.
I think it makes sense to make it purple. That west edge of the park and the giant cliff there is sort of a design challenge. But I think, if we wanted to activate the edge of that park, we would need to look at some design standards there so that we could make it possible for, I don't even know what the building would look like. That's probably for architects, but like you can engage both kind of the street level and the park level. I think, there are a couple other things we might want to look at there. Like I think if you were to trim a little bit in Jack Long, you might have a view towards the west. So we might also want to incorporate some like view sheds there. But I think it makes sense to make this purple as well to close in the corners of that park. And I think it needs like, I don't know, my opinion is Jack Long kind of needs some love. Like it's, sort of the forgotten park. And so if we can coordinate some development standards there, I think that'll help it out a bit. Access will be a little tricky, I think, is the only thing. So again, probably coordinating in development standards, and we might need some extra attention from the city to make stuff possible there, but I think we should make it possible.
Anyone else? Sounds like I'm hearing 2 yeses for extending that zoning. I'm fine with having it be purple as well. I agree with Commissioner Betcher, access may be an issue, but, if thoughtfully planned, there probably could be a solution to that.
I agree.
All right, so we have affirmative. That's the only piece of property that staff had a question on the map changes, was just that we weren't quite sure of that little piece right there. That's why we reached out. I think we made the rest of the changes per our discussion. So I think that was the only thing that was kind of not clear in our minds.
Okay.
Okay.
I guess since we're looking at that, we talked a lot about the areas, that were circled on the map and, kind of going back and forth and, felt like we kind of came to an agreement, at the end of the night. And to me, I'm not, nothing's blaring to me standing out that was overlooked or missed. It looks like they captured our discussion. So I just wanted to make sure everybody else felt the same way.
Yes.
I think design standards have a lot of work to do in a few of these areas, but yeah, I think this is a good map. I want to live in this town.
Okay.
All right. So transitioning now to some of the agency and public comments that we received. So I briefly summarized them, just pulling out the key concepts. So we received a letter from Landsberg Quality Homes. The letter referred to Dwayne Landsberg participation in the CPAG process. So that's the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Group. He was a member And he had a comment about focusing opportunities created by the last comp plan amendment for a revitalized town center. And he had support for alternative 3 and higher densities. In terms of agency comments, we received a letter from the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife on draft goals and policies and suggestions for policy language. And they also provided some best available science resources as an attachment. We received a letter, sorry, it was an email from the Department of Natural Resources, Washington Geological Survey. And these comments were related to the environment element in particular and critical areas, so specifically geological hazards. There were suggestions to add references to geologically hazardous areas and natural resource areas in policy language. Last meeting, we distributed a letter from Snohomish County Camino Association of Realtors. And so in terms of that letter, there were comments on suggestions for thoughtful implementation of the environmental policies, as well as support for alternative 2 and support for focusing housing and employment growth in mixed-use areas, balancing environmental protection with housing and responsible growth, support for transit-oriented development, incentivizing new development, expressing some caution and concern around eliminating parking, aligning transit with housing, and caution on requiring energy-efficient infrastructure due to the cost that would be on the developer. And then a community member sent in a note suggesting areas to allow for mixed use and where to prioritize transportation, and suggesting some densities proposed in alternative 2 and 3 and specific to this community member's neighborhood. On the back end, just some other things we're tracking. So we have received some comments from the Department of Commerce. They provided a comment checklist, and we're waiting for their 60-day comment letter, which is due by October 6th, I believe. We did meet with Commerce to go over some of their preliminary comments on September 19th. And so staff will respond to these comments and incorporate all the required elements in the final plan based on this letter and based on our discussion with Commerce. Separately, we are anticipating comments by the Puget Sound Regional Council by end of this month, and we're going to meet with them on this Thursday, actually, September 26th, to go over their comments. I believe a majority of their comments were related to the transportation element. And then council, we received some preliminary comments last week from Mayor Pro Tem Wall on the housing economic vitality, and I believe the land use element. So we will be reviewing those and incorporating some of those suggestions following the Planning Commission recommendation. And staff had some minor edits that we would like to be addressed in the final plan. So this sort of summarizes the comments, agency comments and public comments as we move forward with this process. And let's see. And just bringing this back up, we presented this last meeting, just a summary of the draft EAS comments. So, any questions?
So I didn't review the 300-page manual that was associated with the public comment, but I did review some of the other public comments, and I think they made pretty good points. At what capacity, but I know we're kind of at the end of our process, what capacity do we have to like incorporate their comments? Is that council related now?
Yeah, council, I mean, staff is preparing a memo of the different recommended changes. We don't disagree. There are some things that we could do by adding some additional policies. Some of the comments where we would like to see, so for example, Department of Fish and Wildlife wanted us to attach best available science manual. In that case, staff recommendation would be no. We're required to use best available science for critical areas, and you guys will see critical areas. And so just taking a look at if we need to do certain things, I'm happy to do those, or to change language a little bit to take those recommendations. If it's kind of hey, attach this 300-page document that nobody's going to read that's not really applicable to the comp plan, then I would say my recommendation is no. So I think it's pretty minor tweaks that we're seeing now with the comments, like Jonathan said, from Puget Sound Regional Council. We know that they're going to want just a little clarity on how the transportation numbers, that how we got those. Happy to give them that information and do those as some attached documentation. I think you see that some of the other things are more like, hey, let's have thoughtful implementation. To me, that's really not a change. Or please don't make us do energy requirements. Well, we have to, per state law. So I don't think it's anything that's going to affect our document in any major way. It's going to be minor tweaks. And then what we're doing as staff is just making sure that all the numbers are correct throughout the documents, that all those little punctuation errors and all the other stuff, that's all clean. So we have a nice clean document that's been gone through several set of eyes to be edited correctly. So council's gonna make a few changes if they would like to anyways. I think what we saw or what we've heard, I don't think it's any major change from what Planning Commission has put forth at this point.
Okay, yeah, I agree. I thought there were some good language tweaks about connectivity of the parks and looking, make more specific references to wildlife. And
Yeah,
the upzoning of Floody Flats down by Ballinger Park, I think makes sense from a pragmatic standpoint. I don't know how much capacity we have to do that.
Are you talking about Mr. Jeremiah's comment?
Yes.
Okay, I think I forgot about, we just got his comment last week. You want to pull up the map? I think we need to talk about that since we've got comments through the EIS and comp plan, and I've just been kind of putting them all together because I think the intent is the comment, not how people gave them to us. So I'd rather address them in both venues versus cut somebody off and not address it. So thanks for pointing that out.
Is it here?
Yeah, I know. I took a look at that, and I drive past, or I drive down that road quite frequently, and that neighborhood, what isn't shown here is Hall Creek, and that neighborhood is, most of those lots have less than 10 feet away from Hall Creek, which would make me say that that is not a viable upzone.
Yeah, what you're going to run into there is under critical areas, you're going to have buffer setbacks from the Hall Creek. And so it's not going to be in what's called a shoreline of statewide significance under the Shoreline Master Program, but it is going to be under the critical areas. And Commissioner Morgan is correct in that you're not going to see the potential to really upzone that area based on critical areas. You're just not. So I understand that that's a desire, but I think pragmatically you're going to run into issues of trying to upzone that stuff right there. If folks need to remember, Hall Creek and all of that watershed going into Lake Ballinger is wetland heaven. Mm-hmm. And so it's very difficult when you're starting to get into those areas. And that's why it's been, we've taken a look at it and tried to do some restoration in that area. Even for a park, it's not really the type of park where you're going to recreate in such a manner where you're playing and have playgrounds and stuff. It's really about protection and, restoring habitat and having some very non-invasive trails and such through there. probably in today's world, a lot of that stuff that's developed adjacent to that wouldn't even be allowed to be developed, probably, most likely, so.
Has FEMA updated the flood maps for this area?
FEMA updated the flood maps a while ago, but you just kind of have overlapping critical areas there. Not only floodplain, you just have fish and wild habitat, you have wetlands, you have issues for development.
Yeah, there are some of these areas where, like, you know, yes, it makes sense from like a human geography standpoint, but like I think, you know, as flooding gets worse and rain and events get more intense, and we look at areas like this, you know, very sort of low-lying area here, like we need to eventually have a plan to kind of deal with them. Because I do think, like, you know, Ballinger would really benefit from some like activation along the edges of the park, and as a regional facility, it really would be beneficial. I don't know if there's anything we can do in that area that's sort of a balance, and it might even be like a parcel by parcel thing, which to me says maybe this isn't the right venue for it. But I do think it's an idea worth considering, how the future of some of these sort of low-lying floody areas that are also built on like liquefying soils and all these other fantastic, like very colorful, environmentally critical area maps, sort of how we deal with those in the future. So,
Well, we'll be updating our critical areas ordinance next year, so guess what? That will come before you. You know, I think what a map doesn't show is what we all know. You don't see the hillsides on here. You don't see fish and wildlife habitat areas. You don't see the stuff that's actually on the ground. So it's like when you look at, oh, it's flat. Hey, and we're going to do this here and do this here. But, you know, the reality is we're working around certain things and environmental regulations. So, you know, that's kind of part of what we're doing here as well.
yeah, when we get to critical areas, I don't know if that's just mapped critical areas, if we're anticipating future critical areas, but.
So what we do is we do what's called best available science. So we have mapped critical areas, but it's mapped and it's also lands that meet the definition of a critical area. So just because something's not on a map now, if somebody's proposing to do something, we would take a look at that environmental part. And if it fits that description of like, hey, this, you know, this wetland isn't on this map, or in the case of some of maps, say for instance, the National Wetland Inventory, you know, that has about a 50 to 60% accuracy rate. For us, we're pretty good here just because we're so small. But, you know, in some areas, those maps weren't exact science back when they were created, right? So we use that as best available science. And then as we add to those areas, then we consistently update our maps to show that.
I would just add that, yeah, I kind of agree with everything that's been said. And, you know, and if we did have additional capacity that we were looking to add into this neighborhood, I would say, you know, shifting that more east at, you know, on the, you know, on the hillside where we already have, you know, apartments and condos, that seem to be the more logical place to kind of put a more intense, dense development than in the low-lying watershed where, you know, it's probably marsh most of the year.
Okay. All right, so wanted to recap what the review process has been. So we kicked off with Planning Commission on July 8th. So that culminated in today's public hearing. With council, we started that review process September 12th. At the next meeting this week, September 26th, we will be going over the remaining element chapters. So last meeting, we went over 4 element chapters. The next meeting, we'll be going through the remaining 4 chapters. And then we'll also be introducing the recommended land use map from Planning Commission. October 3rd, we will continue that review, anticipating some discussion on the upzoning and what the implications might be. And then October 16th is the scheduled public hearing to consider the Planning Commission recommendation. Before that, on October 10th, we have that as a placeholder in case there's a need for more discussion with council. Then sort of wanted to back up, big picture, what the overall periodic update process has been. So as you know, we started with the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Group. We had about 11 meetings total, formed in September 23, and that ended June 26, 2024. Planning Commission, we brought forward different elements of the comprehensive plan process. So for example, February 2023, we presented on a proposed scope of work and project timeline, very early phases of this work. In June 2023, we had a presentation on the public participation plan. August 2023, we had a presentation on the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Group. And then December 2023 was our first comp plan briefing before we moved to a more consistent schedule of meetings 2 times a month from January 2024 to June 2024. And this is not including that public review process, which we started in July. Boards and commissions, we had 4 meetings with the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission to review proposed equity-related policies and also seek some feedback on community engagement approaches. We met with the Recreation Parks Advisory Commission in May to introduce and discuss the recreation parks and open space goals and policies, and we got some really good feedback from that group that we've incorporated in the our post element. And then with council, we had 9 meetings total. So 5 meetings beginning in March 2023. And then we had a briefing series with meeting every other month between February 2024 and August 2024. And again, that doesn't include the draft plan review process that kicked off in September with council. And then just a reminder, we had that Comprehensive Plan 101 joint workshop with CPAG, Planning Commission, and Council. And that recording is still available on our website. And I think, and in terms of engagement, as you recall, we had the survey, SEPA scoping open house. We had a spring open house in March of 2024. We had a sub-area workshop in June, a draft EIS public meeting, an online open house that was open up until recently, actually. And then we did some tabling and outreach this summer at some of our events, so Untitled Terrace and National Night Out. And then we also had a target engagement approach with intercept surveys, informal conversations, and then general outreach support by our consultant on the draft EIS open house. So quickly, next steps. I went over what's going to be covered at the council meeting September 26th. For project staff, again, we will incorporate recommendations that we receive tonight from Planning Commission, as well as moving forward from council into the final plan, and then incorporate comments from the Department of Commerce, Puget Sound Regional Council, and other agencies, comments that we received. Incorporate those final edits from city staff into the final plan. And concurrently, we are working on the final EIS as we move forward with the final comp plan. That is my presentation today. Any questions or comments?
I had a quick question. So it sounds like, there might be some, technical corrections and some additions that are still going to be added. And from what it sounds like, council has indicated that they might want to have some things added in terms of policy language or possible changes.
Yeah, we've only got comments from one council member, Councilmember Wall, so far. Most of his suggestions are very minor in nature. Some of them have to do with like typos. And then there's a couple of small, like, policy type suggestions in his comments. So that's the only comments that we've received from council thus far.
Alice used to be really good about catching those typos.
Yeah, we need her right now,
I
actually.
know, I miss her.
Yeah, so I, like I said, I don't think that there's huge substantive changes that we're going to get or make on the plan. It's typical that there would be some minor stuff that would be done by council if perchance we go through the plan with council and there would be a lot of changes, then we would bring that back to the planning commission for sure. If we, like,
Yeah.
hey, we're doing all this stuff. But I would say the reason that we were working with council this whole time was to continuously bring them your work as you were going through the documents and kind of keeping them abreast. So we didn't get down to the end and then, things are a surprise, or you're trying to look through 200 pages of documents instead of trying to follow along. So I'm hoping the way that we've tried to roll it out is not going to cause that at the end of the process.
So if it's just, say, 5 or 10 really minor things that don't really change the intent of all of the discussions that we have, is it possible just to sort of get a synopsis back saying, hey, these are the small corrections that, if it doesn't meet the threshold where we really, it really needs to come back to us?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just so we
And,
know.
yeah, like I said, we're preparing a memo even to put or document the changes going before council with staff review. So we'd be happy to share that document with you, and then whatever happens at council.
That'll definitely make it easier for my old school hard copy here, so.
Yeah.
I don't
and
have to
then-
get,
and then
make
we'll-
another version be printed. I can just sort of
Yeah.
add that additional sheet saying, oh, and on page 3, there's this change.
And since the document that you have now with the pictures and the graphics and all of that is in InDesign, that's part of the reason we're doing it as well, is to make sure we're catching all of the changes as the final document, and you guys will all get the final document. But it takes somebody that knows how to work in InDesign to edit the document. So we're just, in the effort to save money, we're trying to do that all at one time, any of those last changes to the document.
So I know there's been a lot of changes the last few years, especially with technology and stuff, but historically, anytime a new comp plan was adopted, hard copies a lot of hard copies used to be printed. I know we don't print as many now, but our commission usually each received a copy, with an actual, not spiral bound, but, one of those clunky Kinko type binding, just to, more than a binder clip, more than a 3-ring binder. But will we still get that as well? Or
Yeah, anybody that wants a hard copy, we're happy to give those to you.
Okay, yeah, because I know
Do you
this.
prefer the Kinko thing? Because I hate the Kinko thing. Because I like the 3-ring binder in that, to me, it's easier. Those little Kinko things always get stuck on the pages. However you guys want them, we'll give them to you. But yeah, absolutely. You want a hard copy? Yeah, back in the day, we'd order like 200 copies of the comp plan. We don't do that anymore, but anybody that wants one, absolutely. And I like to have one in my office as well, so.
Well, it makes it easier for handy
Yeah.
reference, especially marking it up
Yep.
and stuff. To be honest, we had never been presented the option of having the Kinko type bounding or the 3-ring binder. So
Well, you know what?
was
We're
all done the
happy
same way,
to oblige in however you want it, or that works for you, happy to do it, seriously. Just let us know, and we'll provide that.
Does anybody else have any questions for staff?
We had a whole sub-area workshop, and there were some sub-area plans. Where are we on that?
You want to talk about the sub-area?
Sure. So a lot of that work is in the land use element. So we have a section on sub areas, and so a lot of the discussion and feedback that we heard is summarize and key priority areas for each of the 2 sub-areas of focus. So that's Cascade View and Melody Hill.
So normally, maybe this should have been a question like months ago. When we've done our sub areas like Melody Hill, Town Center, it was a separate standalone document.
Yeah.
So we won't have standalone documents for the sub areas moving forward.
Correct, not these, yeah, and maybe that could have been clearer for you folks, but it was an attempt to at least start to try to address each of these sub-areas in a different, at least a more comprehensive fashion or an updated fashion. I think that's ongoing discussion, so we'll have zoning, which is a lot of that middle housing that we talked about, that's due in June. So we're going to start working on that right out of the gate. We have critical areas ordinance. I have a list of all the things we need to do. It is plentiful. Those are the 2 things that are kind of major. Then, since some of that stuff is due to the state in the middle of June, I would like to concentrate on getting that done so we stay in compliance with state law. So that's going to be accessory dwelling units, all that 4-plex, 6-plex, 8-plex, all the stuff that incorporates all the changes to the land use map that we don't have, that neighborhood mixed use stuff and how we're going to implement that. That would all be the first. And then there's things in our code that are old and really don't work that great anymore. Planned unit developments, cottage housing, a lot of that other stuff. I would like to do that on the back half of next year to where we get through a lot of these zoning changes and get that all complete. And then also that critical areas stuff. I think at that point is a conversation of how can we effectively move forward, maybe of addressing the sub-areas, and not necessarily as a separate sub-area plans, but maybe as a sub-area document that incorporates the sub-areas, if you will. So I think that's a future conversation. Or are there some areas that you guys would like to focus on for neighborhood plans? And maybe that's not a neighborhood plan in every sub-area, but there's portions of each sub or some sub-areas that might need a little bit more attention.
Speaking for me personally, I would say, probably the answer is yes. I mean, I know the goal was to hit, obviously, we're having to stagger this over a course of,
Right.
maybe 2 years or so, but, be able to address every sub-area. And I know there, there's been discussion too about, the current boundaries of our sub-area. Maybe some are too big and could be split off. And really, by splitting it off, there are some areas of that sub-area that really needs that focused attention, whereas there's an area that is so far removed from any potential mixed-use activity. It's purely single-family residential that is probably never going to see any kind of change. And it doesn't really make sense, like, well, why is that part even a part of this sub-area to begin with? Having those discussions, so that's a yes to that. And then it would also be a yes, or more of a yes/question of when we do that, then how does that get incorporated into the existing comp plan, since it won't be a standalone document? Is that just an annual amendment that we're allowed to make, or?
It could be, yeah. So sub-areas were allowed to amend annually. I would say we have a portion of the plan. I think for Town Center, you need a separate document just because Town Center is very specific. But for our other sub-areas, I think what we could do is amend this portion of the comp plan, and we can do that annually with a sub-area plan amendment. Actually, we can amend a sub-area off-cycle even, but it would be better just knowing the time that it would take. But yeah, we could come back in and say, we're working on this section of the comp plan. I think it's nice if we have information available as much as we can in the same place for people. Because it's what we found, it's kind of how we redesigned our engineering standards and other documents. If it's here, there, and everywhere, and, you know, I'm the public and I'm trying to use this, or I'm a developer, or I'm whoever, and I don't know that it's in 17 places, but I do know that if you put it in a document and try to put everything in there, then I can most likely get the information I need. I think subareas is the same way. So to me, I like to see that maybe we incorporate that into our comp plan as we go.
Would it be possible then, and again, this might be more of a editorial technical lift that we might not have time for now, but seeing that, incorporate our existing sub-area plans into this document as well as like Appendix A.
Yeah,
The existing
absolutely.
town center Appendix
Yeah,
B, the
yeah.
existing Melody Hill, or where we sort of updated the Melody Hill because that was a standalone document.
Right.
It was, well, you know, it was a substantial document too.
Yeah,
So that's why I
right.
kind of cringe when I hear it's like, oh, it's just all going to be part of this. So, but you know, as long as like
Yep.
it's a chapter or you know, where it's completely focused on that and, you know, still hitting
Either
all
way,
those points.
absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, the town center plan was referenced in the 2019 comp plan as well. So, I mean, because we did do some changes to the economic vitality element at that same time for the planning commissioners that weren't here. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of just depending on how we want to frame this together, but it's nice that it's kind of in one place for people, I think. So whether you do it as an appendices or whether you put it as part of a sub-areas chapter or chapters or however you do that, I mean, we can definitely move in that direction and keep working on some of these areas. And I know there's been a lot of conversation too about, hey, I know that we created these areas long ago, but are they still applicable as they're drawn?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was really hoping that we would be addressing during this cycle, but, you know, you said previously that, you know, next year we may be able to, you know, look at that. So sort of expanding on that concept of, you know, sort of incorporating all of these separate sort of land use planning documents that we have. The transportation plan, you know, it's kind of a hefty document on its own.
Sure.
Everything's sort of interrelated, though.
Right.
Not to try and make this, you know, Encyclopedia Britannica, but would it make sense to have that be its own section in this document as well? Or does it still make more sense to have that as a separate standalone?
Yeah, usually it's, you know, it's part of, addressed as an appendices to like the capital plans. The thing is sometimes those plans change more often than the actual comp plan. So usually they're referenced and so they're applicable. It's supposed to be coordinated and consistent with each other. But just to make sure that you're able to efficiently amend those things as you need for like capital facilities planning and other things as you go along, because you're going to do a major update about every 10 years on this document right here. But that doesn't mean that you can't take pieces of this document and amend them. And, you know, the city has. So
So I
you
think
could do that.
probably, you know, and by doing it this way too, what it'll probably mean moving forward, every year on our work plan, there's going to be a comp plan element carved out on our work plan, but it might be sub-area A, sub-area B, you know, it might change, but where it used to be where we really didn't have comp plans. I mean, there was the occasional update, but, you know, we could maybe go a couple of years without really addressing the comp plan, whereas now moving forward, it's going to be a more routine thing.
Right. The nice thing is we're going to have a amended comp plan that's more up to date. We're going to have amended zoning because you're going to look at basically all existing zoning and update that, which will be nice. And then that's going to set the stage for going and doing some work on these sub areas. Plus, we didn't have some of these documents in place before. You know, basically when I got here, we didn't have a critical areas ordinance. We didn't have some of these documents. So now we have a lot of those documents that we didn't have at one point. So when we go, my hope is when we go to amend our critical areas ordinance, it's just a few tweaks. When we have a good transportation plan, it's just a few tweaks. But you got to do the work to get, the first one out the door. Same with the engineering standards. We got a good base document. Now it'll go and just we can tweak it and make the changes that we need to moving forward. But we don't have to we don't have to work 2 years to create the whole thing. So I think we're going to be in a good place to start working on these sub-area plans as our long-range planning effort.
So since it is sort of a frequent update of the plan, when we do hit the cycle for the actual new plan, that would still be kind of the year and a half long process.
Yep.
Kind of reinventing the wheel all over again.
It's just going to depend. Part of what we've tried to address this time is just that there's been so much legislation that's been passed trying to address affordable housing and middle housing and a lot more, a bigger attempt at addressing members of our community that haven't been included in the process. And, all really good things, but it also has, it has an impact on, what we had previously. And so, that's kind of a full cell thing. You're just required to review and amend if necessary, but I would say the if necessary part in our situation, we needed to do that. So I can't even guess what 10 years looks like right now.
Is there,
I don't know.
I mean, I've kind of made my feelings known about the newly enacted legislation and, kind of how it's kind of top down and every, city's a little unique, and it felt like we were sort of being punished because we have been proactive in this process, but yet we're being punished along with the cities that have tried to ignore this.
Right.
If for some reason, and I have no inkling if it would or not, but if this legislation gets repealed or changed, I know there were things that we felt hamstringed on this process that we wanted to do, but couldn't because the legislation dictated, oh no, it has to be specifically this or specifically that.
Right.
It really kind of handcuffed us with us kind of want to actually going beyond what that legislation was mandating. If it's repealed, what is the mechanism for us to revisit those issues as soon as possible?
Yeah, so there would be an opportunity as part of your work plan to do an annual amendment to your comp plan, right? So you could request to City Council, hey, as part of our annual amendment cycle, we would like to propose an amendment to the comp plan to address X, Y, or Z. So that can be done on a yearly basis. So there's definitely the opportunity.
Hopefully, I'm not speaking out of turn on that one, because I got the sense that almost everyone had one of those moments when we were talking about stuff or thinking, oh, wouldn't it be great? Or what about this? Just to be told, oh, well, the legislation doesn't.
Yeah.
So, okay. That's enough talking for me. Anybody else got it?
Yeah, just to sort of, follow up with my comment, it sounds like sub-area planning is going to be continuous. I know we had, kind of a scope at the beginning of doing sub-area planning for 2 areas and presumably extra consulting contract money to do that. It sounds like we're going to maybe redefine that to possibly track the sub-areas that we defined as we go through the remaining updates we have to do for this sort of wholesale envisioning of all of our documents. So that is my understanding correct?
Yeah, I would just say that there can be more attention, not only in these sub-areas, but the other sub-areas as we move forward, which I know is a long-standing desire. But I think as part of that, the first part of that's going to be analyzing what actually are the sub-areas.
I think that's something we've been that sounds like we've been asking for a while, so that's good. And we're also either wholesale re-envisioning or just completely creating new neighborhoods into existence here with neighborhood centers. So I think that makes sense
Yeah.
to have kind of a summary at the end of that process and then map it back to where we started.
Yeah, and because it's kind of pulled separate, I think it's going to be fairly easy to do that. And that's kind of the intent that you would start with taking a look. And I mean, if you really look at some of the work you've done, you've kind of started, like we talked about, to lay the foundation of building around those neighborhood centers, the mixed use, where you have some commercial and you have those neighborhoods around some of those commercial areas. And to me, that's where you logically start building those sub areas around those areas.
Yeah, and I think some of them, like what I'm calling Evergreen Long, and then the Cedar Plaza, like, you know, they kind of are a little bit less existing now, but some of them, I think, like Melody Hill and 212th are going to be more complicated because they exist
Right.
more.
Right.
So I think, you know, especially when I look at that purple meshing with the red off of 220th on the west side of the interstate, like, I think that's going to take a lot of extra effort to envision how that works, as opposed to be like, oh, yes, we'll just put some, you know, this is where the shops go and whatnot. So I think, like, it's still worthwhile to track those spines specifically, and they map kind of well to sub-area planning.
Yeah, Jonathan and I just recently spoke to community transit as well, and I think there's an opportunity with some emphasis from some of the transit providers as well to really engage them in some of those planning efforts, which we really haven't seen before. To try to build around some of the concepts that we've tried to key in on this comp plan, and the multimodal and the connections, and getting people to the various portions of our neighborhoods, and then also trying to provide goods and services closer to where people live as well. So I think there's a real opportunity ahead for us to look at some of that and see where we think it makes sense with what we have, and maybe where it doesn't make sense, and start there.
That's good. One of the complaints I've had from the last cycle is that I think, you know, I've actually seen reduced bus service because they took away the commuter buses that were running in some areas, but still kept like half-hourly buses. And then like some of these neighborhoods, like, you know, I look at this and like they really should run a bus from Edmonds down to 20th, up 52nd, down to 12th, and then over to Linwood Transit Center, because these are like, you know, we've got neighborhoods that are centered on these spines, but like they're completely ignored. So one of the things that I may or may not have asked, but, you know, thought, oh, I really should have asked, was like, how do we engage Sound Transit in this, or community transit in this process? Because I feel like, you know, they've been focusing a lot on like their different colorful lines, but then efforts like this, like, you know, we are really kind of relying on them to make this whole strategy work. And in order to do that, we should probably talk to them to make sure we can do that.
Yep, agreed.
I would agree. You know, just looking at sort of that map that shows the bus routes, and the fact that one of our, you know, densest part of the city on 212th doesn't have a bus going by it is kind of like, geez, really? It'd probably be more helpful if it is as dense on the other side of 44th, on the Linwood side, but, you know, it's, or not 44th, on the other side of 212th, but still, that, you know, that's a lot of people, not only on the road, but, you know, even set back, you know, couple parcels deep, I mean, that's a lot of people that are living there.
Yeah, and they're
aren't within
working on
walking
their
distance.
comp plan right now, Linwood as well. So I think, you know, if we join efforts with Linwood as well to ask them to, you know, take a look at what we're doing and what we're envisioning, even just for the comfort of people, of having bus stops that people, you know, can have a shelter in key places and wait for the bus. You know, some of those things make a huge difference. And then, yeah, just times, you know, of, hey, I can wait here for 2 hours, unrealistic, or we can have bus service on some of these main lines where people are actually going to be using this to commute. So that's really important too. I think they're going to see a lot more pressure from folks with light rail opening, and people needing to have consistent service to get to the transit centers and those type of things as well, so.
Anybody else have any questions, comments? Want to double check with our online commissioner? Haven't forgot about you.
No, everything sounds great.
Excellent. All right, and so you said that was it for the staff report?
That's it, yep. So
Okay.
I'll turn it over to you.
Great. So since we have now received the staff report, looks like we are ready for the public hearing. Would anybody like to make a motion to open the public hearing?
Make a motion to open the public hearing.
I have a motion to open the public hearing. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Public hearing is now open. Staff, was there any written testimony submitted for public comment tonight?
There is no written testimony, however, we do have someone who would wish to present.
Okay, is in person or
comment.
online?
In person.
In person? Okay.
You will have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, good evening. My name is Kirk Ishizaki. I'm a member of West Plaza and the property manager of the West Plaza Marketplace. The West Plaza Marketplace supports 130-plus employees and their families with businesses such as Double D Meats that has been a part of the town center since 1955. I've participated in several city-sponsored events, and I've observed the Planning Commission work sessions in person and have access to Commission's sessions online via YouTube. So, thank you for your hard work. It is an overwhelming amount of information to follow. I am encouraged to see that the topic of maintaining affordable commercial space and supporting existing businesses are discussed during the work sessions while planning for new businesses and higher density. Some of the discussions among the Planning Commission members imply that 57th as a done deal, which would displace 130-plus employees and negatively affect the community. Last week, on September 19th, the City Council amended the Economic Development Strategic Plan to address these concerns. We look forward to re-examining 57th and the alternatives with the city to support existing businesses. Please examine the effect of last week's amendment to the economic development element on the 2024 comprehensive plan update. Please consider making changes to the transportation element. Thank you.
Thank you. Would staff be able to provide a little bit more context to that?
Yeah, so future 57th, as you guys know, most of you are aware in the town center plan is an attempt to divide the super block, what we call the super block, which is where West Plaza is, where we don't have kind of a grid street system going through some of those properties as development occurs. And that was in the town center plan, and that was also in previous transportation planning documents of trying to provide a way to make those connections when those properties redevelop. And in that case, it would be up to the developer to provide those improvements if and when those properties redeveloped. So there was a tweaking of some of the language in the economic strategic plan that you guys reviewed and recommended adoption, just to try to clarify essentially that premise that if and when those properties develop, that there's a plan in place to make those connections to what would be 232nd and 236th from a northwest viewpoint, and then also to make east-west connections through these blocks of property across the street. So I think that's been clarified to the satisfaction of West Plaza, that the change that was made in the economic strategic plan on Thursday. Okay. So yeah, I think, but that was in that economic document, so.
Okay. Does anybody have any follow-up questions for staff on that?
Are we allowed to make comments?
Yeah, normally we don't have, usually public comment is pretty straightforward, so we don't
Okay.
usually have to make additional comments, but usually there's a follow-up question, so I know.
I have a question, and that is, what, are there current plans for that development that is changing our plan that was set forth in the town center?
No. There was a request to do, as part of Phase 2 of Main Street, which is 56, there was a request to do some preliminary design work for 57th, with the intent that if those properties developed, that there could be some design work put in place as part of what's called a RAISE grant, which was a federal grant to receive money. The city did not receive those funds, and so there's no design of 57th to begin with on the table, but there was never an intent. If the city would have to condemn property, demolish businesses, construct the street, and in order to eliminate that, and I do not believe that that has ever been the intent of the document or of the city council to do that. It has been an effort with my involvement just to plan for the future, that as some of those properties redevelop in town center, that we have logical pedestrian and vehicular connections in areas that we don't have right now. So that's.
I guess what I'm thinking is just, are we going to miss out on the opportunity of connecting that street through this, or without designing the street now? Because it completely makes sense on, if you look at a map, that obviously to create kind of a
Yeah.
town center feel, there needs to be a connector road at some point.
Yeah, I don't know the.
Shooting ourselves in the foot, but.
Yeah, I don't know the exact, if the language change said that the city wouldn't design it. I don't know the exact language. I heard it earlier today. But I think the intent is not based on doing any type of design work. I think the intent was to clarify that the city does not intend to go in and, demolish businesses that are existing right there at this time, that the intent is, if and when those properties redeveloped, that there is some type of plan in place how you would make those connections, just like a lot of the other work that has been done of where not only on 57th, but other areas around town center where you just run into a dead end, and yet we've upzoned those properties and there's no connections, pedestrian connections, vehicular connections. And so if you have no connection and you're dead ending, you're basically eliminating the potential for future development in which you've zoned it in the first place, right? So it's like, hey, when this develops, this is where logically we see this road being extended. But like I said, the intent has not been, to this point, to go in and condemn any of these properties, that would be done if and when those properties redevelop by the developer.
I can rephrase my comments in forms of question. So I, read a few months back an article in anticipation of the town center, or of the light rail station opening, and I did see comments that, like, as somebody who went through the town center, revisioning process back in 2019, were a little bit surprising. My impression was that it's like, as you described, these things will be redeveloped as the town center develops. So we're not necessarily bulldozing some buildings, but, somebody else is bulldozing the buildings because they
Right.
want to. So it sounds like this comment and update addresses that disconnect.
That's my understanding. I wasn't there for the council hearing. I just saw the language earlier today, and that there were comments and there was a change made to the document to try to address the concern, to make it to clarify the intent.
Okay. And I know we're 5 years into this plan. 3 of them are pandemic years, 4 of them maybe. So maybe it's a little bit unfair, but I think in addition to inventing all these other neighborhoods, like look and see what works and what doesn't. I think I might have mentioned this before, and maybe I've heard other people say it. Like maybe it's worth a review. Do you think this is a good time to maybe look a little bit more cohesively and refine some of these elements of the town center plan, or would you push that further out?
Well, I would say zoning's our first priority, so we don't end up in jail this next year. And then I think the second priority would be these sub areas, and that's up to me, to planning commission, of what your priority would be at that point. So I think first of all, looking at those sub areas, do we have the right sub areas is what my suggestion would be. And then which one do you want to, in what order? But yeah, I think taking a look at what we've done in all of these areas needs a fresh look, and, nothing's 100% perfect, or nothing is what your intent is 100%. So is there some things that we can readdress? Absolutely.
Great.
Yeah.
And I would say, I know, because we had this discussion when we were talking about which sub area we wanted to do first. Personally, I made this comment then, I'll just sort of reiterate it, that I think it was important to get sub area plans on the books for the areas that don't have them currently. Those get the priority. When we, right at the beginning, when we started this process, the town center was the most recent sub area that we did. So I didn't want to ignore the rest of the city just to keep revisiting the town center. Commissioner Betcher's right. We really got bit on the behind with the pandemic. Just like in our 08 sub area, we got hit with a huge recession. We just have this awful timing when it comes to this. But I think now that the light rail station is open, it might be worth it to get a little bit of time under our belt with what the demand is and how things have changed because of the light rail now. Because everything leading up to this was speculation. Well, now we're here. The kickoff has happened, so we're playing this game now. So I think it's important to get some data back from this. Saying, okay, has the what is the demand? Has it upticked? Is it different than what we had set our plan for out? Because Commissioner Best, right? Every couple of years, yeah, maybe it does need revisiting, but I think you almost don't want to count those pandemic years because everything was put on pause. And so I don't think there's any harm in maybe waiting a little bit longer to revisit the town center rather than doing it so soon. But depending on staff capacity and workload, since we're going to be revisiting the comp plan every year anyway, that might be it might be a possibility, but I would say if it's between town center and a sub-area that has not gotten any love from us ever, I think it should be that other town center first, because I think we have enough on the books for the town center to at least get us started, and then we can kind of reevaluate as things come in. That's just my personal opinion. I know that this is probably going to have further discussion anyway, so.
Yeah, and some things will probably need tweaked, and some things will need kind of a, like Chair Batista said, a whole fresh look, right? Because we don't have anything, so we got to build it, whatever that is. So, yeah, well, I mean, you guys will discuss that when you get there. But yeah, I think that makes sense in my mind, moving forward, how we're addressing these things. I know it's frustrating, but we're getting closer to actually having some of these things in place.
How many more planners do you need?
It's interesting, even consultant-wise or planning-wise, because you can have a lot of planners, but this is an important process. So it's like some things just can't be rushed, right? And also, if you're doing planning for an area, then those folks are really important. And so these plans, they take time, and they have to go rightfully through the planning commission, and they have to be vetted through these sub areas. And so you can have all the planners you want. I mean, it would be nice to have a long range planner, I'm not going to lie. But it's just kind of making it a realistic priority every year that this is what we're focusing on. And then hopefully the legislature isn't giving new things all the time. That would be helpful. Hopefully they kind of did their big splash for a while, and then, we can kind of get some other stuff done.
Okay, so just let the record show that was our only in-person public comment in attendance tonight. Was there anybody online that has signed up to make public comment? Okay, great. So I guess now we're at the point on my little checklist here. So since all the public has testified, are there any other additions from the Planning Commission for staff? Anything we haven't already talked about? No, we've had a lot of questions already, so. Nope. Yes? Nope, okay. Just double checking with our online commissioner.
No, thank you.
Okay. All righty, so hold on, I gotta find out. We get to skip some parts here, so. Okay, so being that we've already heard all of our public comment, and we've had our questions asked, I'm looking for a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close the public hearing?
All right, I have a motion to close the public hearing. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. The public hearing is now closed. So at this point, I am looking for a motion to either recommend or deny recommending this to City Council.
I would like to make a motion to recommend Vision 2044 Comprehensive Plan to City Council.
I have a motion. Oh, wait, hold on. And any technical questions?
Not that I heard.
Okay. But that gives staff the freedom to make changes after the fact.
Yeah, I think your motion, you want to include those properties with an amendment to those properties on the backside of Jack Long Park on the map.
Gotcha. So.
How many properties is that?
So we'd like to make a recommendation to approve with changes to the
Yeah, to
land use
recommend,
map
yeah.
to those 4 properties along Jack Long Park.
Yep. Is it 4 or 5? Let's make sure it's 4 or 5.
Looks like 4 tiny boxes to me, but my vision isn't perfect.
It's 5 properties.
Oh, it's 5? All right. So the 5 properties along the west side of Jack Long Park.
Perfect.
Okay, so I have a motion to I'm going to paraphrase a little bit here. So I have a motion to recommend the Vision 2044 Comprehensive Plan to City Council with any technical corrections to include the 5 additional properties being rezoned to that, was that the neighborhood mixed use, the properties that are lying west of Jack Long Park. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, staff. Thank you, consultants. I know this was a very long process. A lot of work went into this, so we are very much appreciative of it.
Yes, we are.
The draft looks fantastic.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's hopefully going to get just a skosh better, so.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I mean, you can only go up from here. It looks really,
Okay.
just like visually a beautiful document.
Oh, nice, thank
And
you.
of course, a ton of incredible work.
But it has to look nice too. Yeah, which is looking at the document.
All right. I don't know what to do myself. It's so early and we're already at director's report.
Hey,
is early?
well, this is a nice change. Director's report, really, this was the big to-do tonight. The only thing that I sadly have to report is that Vice Chair Isaac Harrison has tendered his resignation from the Planning Commission due to some family obligations. And so at this point, I have let the city manager know that. So he will take that information to city council. They will select a new planning commissioner. I know that there were 4 people previously that were very interested in serving on the planning commission. So I don't think that that's going to be an issue. And then I would recommend, since Commissioner Harrison was the vice chair, that you might want to wait for the appointment of that new planning commissioner and then select a vice chair to the planning commission. If you so choose. So I've asked that we try to get that accomplished in a timely manner, because like we said, we will have probably a little bump in the road here as we've been working on middle housing, but we have middle housing to bring forth to you all with a housing study. I think we've done part of that work already with Leland and Associates, who helped us with the comp plan, and formulate that into what will be our zoning for the middle housing. So that will be, to me, a major part of our conversations moving forward, is what that middle housing looks like. We have to amend our accessory dwelling unit provisions. Right now, we have owner occupied requirements, which we no longer can do. So things like that we'll bring back to the Planning Commission. So we'll start working on that with you all as soon as we can. Staff is going to be trying to get all this information to council for the next few weeks, as you've seen, and update these documents before Thursday, and try to get through that process with them. So that's what we'll be doing in the meantime, and finalizing the environmental impact statement as well. So what that means from the draft is formally addressing any of the comments that we got on that draft, tweaking that to make any of those changes. We didn't select a preferred alternative. If you remember, that's alternative 2. And that's because of doing the work. That's what we know we can serve in the next 20 years. So we'll be making that designation of the preferred alternative and addressing those comments and finalizing that document before it's, the comp plan will be adopted by City Council. So that's kind of what's happening in the next 3 weeks. I don't know. I've lost count. 3 or 4 weeks. 3 weeks, actually. Yeah, it's the 23rd. So, and then we're off to do our other work at hand. And then, like I said, you'll start to see critical areas ordinance as part of your vocabulary and some of the other things that we'll need to do coming up here, so.
So historically in the past, we usually haven't waited till a position has been filled before electing when it's a loss of somebody who, holds a, position of chair or vice chair.
Okay. Yeah, that's up to you guys as a board, how you want to handle that.
And so, and that's kind of why I'm bringing this up too. I'll kind of leave it to how everybody else feels about it. But I would also say, if somebody who's brand new and we say, okay, we got our seventh person now, we're having an election tonight, and they're not, they barely
Sure.
remember who people's names are, let alone
Yeah.
what the role of the vice chair actually does, and, seen meetings, especially seen, public hearings, and really gotten a feel of what that entails, not to discredit maybe somebody who, might be super eager in their first days, like, oh yeah, I want to volunteer, that could be an option. So I don't want to discount that, but generally, they're kind of walking into it, and they're being handed stacks full of binders. It's like, okay, this is all the training you're going to need to do. Plus, we're going to have to sign you up for other stuff that's state mandated. There's going to be a lot on their plate coming in. I don't want to discount the fact that they may, would be possibly a candidate for the vice chair, but historically, we usually have tried to fill that position right away, especially since now with both remote attendance and a lot of people with active vacation schedules. I know for me, I want to know who my vice chair is right away, so I know if if they're generally going to be here, or if they're, future vacations planned, that, because as you can kind of tell, I'm used to be able to just having that sidebar with the vice chair. It's like, hey, public hearing, you're going to make that motion right tonight? Okay, good. Otherwise, I'm looking for volunteers. I'm like, any. There's been kind of a couple of awkward times where like nobody was making the motion, and like, so. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. So I'm willing to hear other people's opinions on that, if they think we should wait, or if we should just go ahead and move and make an election. If we do, we can't do it tonight. It'll have to be on the agenda. So
Yeah.
we could do it at the next meeting, but then it could be done right away. Or if people would prefer to wait until we have that position filled and we have confirmation when their first meeting is going to be. So I'll welcome for feedback or opinions.
Did you say it has to be on an agenda, or?
It does.
Okay, so we can't do it
Yeah,
tonight.
otherwise I'd be doing it right now.
I know, me too.
Yeah, so we could put it on your next agenda if you guys
Okay.
choose to do that.
How long until we get a new commissioner?
Say one more.
Oh,
sorry.
it's going to depend on the city council appointing someone.
Okay.
So usually 4 weeks, maybe. Like I said, I know that there's candidates that are interested, and that's kind of a big thing. I don't think they have to go out to advertise because they have a list. So I would think it could be done relatively fast, but it's really up to the city council. So yeah, if you want to put it on the next agenda, I'm happy to do that as well.
Yeah, I think 4 weeks without a vice chair seems a little long.
I would just say, though, out of the interest of serving the public, probably should wait for someone else. I completely agree with all of your comments, like we should get somebody in, and we haven't had one necessarily active here. But I think out of due process, usually you should probably wait until the next person. I don't think one person's going to sway the vote by any means, or like we're going to vote for the person who's going to come in. But I think out of due process, that seems appropriate to wait for someone, especially now that we know we're going to have someone.
So obviously, the biggest role of the vice chair is to act on the chair's behalf if the chair is unable to attend.
Right.
Speaking of myself in the third person is kind of weird. So where it definitely helps having a vice chair right away is if for some reason I can't make the meeting, then there's somebody already designated, hey, it's your responsibility, you got to run the meeting, make sure the ship sails on, do all that other kind of stuff. What happens when it's both the chair isn't able to make it and we don't have a vice chair? Whoever shows up to that meeting, you guys are going to be pointing at each other, and it's going to be drawing straws, or who gets the short straw in terms of who's going to run the meeting. And usually it's a lot of, historically speaking, it's like not it. And, nobody's really wanting to do it. Once you do this for a long time, it's like breathing, it becomes
Right.
second nature, but, it is a little stressful the first few times that you're being asked to do, especially when it's sort of like a last second thing. So if people are comfortable with that possibility of you guys might show up to a meeting, there might be not a chair or a vice chair, then we can, then if you feel like we should wait for that, then, we can wait. Otherwise, we can just put it on the next meeting's agenda.
I think it might be prudent to wait until the next meeting and let's kind of hear the updates from city council where they're at with that. And then if it makes sense, let's do it. I just think out of overall setting an example for how to do things, we should probably at least wait until there's a full.
We can put it on the agenda and then you guys can make a
Yeah,
decision.
there you go.
You want
Yeah.
me to do that?
Okay.
I think that makes sense. And if Nick is abducted by aliens between now and next meeting, do we have a procedure for that? Like, genuine question, if like neither one shows up, what happens?
We do, actually. The alien procedures, we do have that in place right now, sir. So, yeah.
It's rare, but let's just say I got scolded by a coworker when they found out how long it's been since I took a vacation. So
I would scold you too.
I'm probably going to have to take one at some point. So
I would just also like to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you folks for doing what you do as planning commissioners and being thoughtful and contributing to something that's really important. I know I'm a planner, so I like all things planning, but I think what we do here is important and what you do here is important. And this really sets the stage for this community moving forward. So thank you for your hard work and your future work in getting us to the point where we have everything to implement this plan and continue to improve it like you're envisioning to do. So thank you all for your hard work. And there are some treats in the back. If you haven't had an opportunity to grab some, please do. Those are for you. They're not for staff. So take 2 or 3 if you need to. Not that I wouldn't give them to staff, but we have enough treats too, but they're intended for you. So anyways, thank you very much.
thank you. Just one last follow up on that. Does council have a work session this week?
They do and will be there.
Okay. Maybe pose the question about a potential timeline for.
Yeah,
The
and
appointment.
I'll probably just be able to get that from the city manager.
Okay.
And I will stay current on what that's looking like, that conversation. So,
Yeah, I mean, I could see why they would maybe just want to go to the list because they had that huge round of interviews for all the boards and commissions, and that was only a couple of months ago.
Yeah,
I could see them just
recent.
wanting to go to that list as opposed to
Yeah.
starting it all,
Yeah.
a whole new cycle over.
My understanding is there was some good candidates too that were interested, so I'm not sure of who they are and all of that good stuff.
Okay.
But that this should be maybe a little bit quicker than if we were just starting from scratch.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's it for director's report?
It is.
Okay, so we're on to item number 7, miscellaneous business by call of planning commissioners. Anybody have any miscellaneous business? Any vacations coming up, known absences, potential resignations? Just gonna have to start adding that now. Yes.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, no idea. Blindsided. So, I was hoping that was sort of ended because before a lot of you joined, it's like we had a whole bunch of new commissioners and we lost 2 right away because they had kids. So thank you for Commissioner Landis for sticking around and not abandoning
Commissioner Landis
us
for
because he
staying
had a kid. I really appreciate it. Okay, so not hearing or seeing any kind of miscellaneous business going on. So with that, I'll go ahead and declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.